Chapter 1 The universe did not end with a bang or a whimper, but with the shriek of tortured metal. Elias Thorne was thrown from his bunk, the impact a percussive blast that turned his bones to tuning forks. The transport ship, the Stellar Lane Drifter, groaned its death rattle as it tore through the upper atmosphere of the uncharted planet designated XG734. Red emergency lighting painted the corridor in frantic, pulsing strokes, illuminating a scene of pure chaos. He scrambled for purchase on the tilting floor, his training as a xenobotanist useless against the raw physics of a catastrophic orbital decay. Around him, the other passengers were a blur of alien anatomy and panicked vocalizations. He saw the ship's captain, Kalen, a Xylosian whose insectoid form was usually a picture of rigid composure, braced against a bulkhead. Kalen's multifaceted eyes, typically calm and analytical, darted everywhere at once, processing 1,000 points of failure. Brace. Brace for impact. Kalen's voice was a series of crisp, staccato clicks, translated into universal standard by the comms unit in Elias' ear. The order was redundant. Gravity had already taken command. Elias saw Grak, the Gralnok security officer, a mountain of scaled muscle and reptilian fury, trying to secure a loose cargo container. The Gralnok's 2 sets of arms worked with brutal efficiency, but the ship's lurching was too violent. The container broke free, smashing through the inner hull and vanishing into the screaming wind outside. The final descent was a symphony of destruction. Elias wedged himself into an alcove, wrapping his arms over his head as the ship screamed its final protest. He thought of Earth, a pale blue memory half a galaxy away. He thought of the scent of rain on pine needles, a sensory ghost in the sterile, ozone-choked air of the dying vessel. Then, a titanic collision, a sound so profound it was felt more than heard, and the universe dissolved into white noise and merciful darkness. He awoke to the taste of copper and the smell of ozone and something alien, something like damp soil and blooming rot. A single, brilliant blue sun hung in a sky the color of a faded bruise, casting long, distorted shadows. A much smaller, dimmer red sun was just beginning to climb over the horizon, adding a bloody tint to the edges of the world. Elias pushed a twisted piece of plasteel off his chest, his ribs screaming in protest. He was alive. He staggered out of the gash in the drifter's hull, his boots sinking into soft, purple-hued moss. The ship was a mangled ruin, snapped in two and embedded in a forest of towering, spiral-trunked trees that glowed with a faint, internal luminescence. The air was thick and humid, heavy with the scent of unknown blossoms and decay. It was breathable, at least. A small miracle, a series of pained clicks drew his attention. Captain Kalen was attempting to extricate one of their 4 slender legs from beneath a collapsed support beam. Their chitinous exoskeleton was cracked along one side, leaking a viscous, amber fluid. Elias rushed over, putting his shoulder to the beam. "Hold on," he grunted, the words feeling clumsy and thick in his own mouth. He heaved, his muscles straining. Kalen watched him, their head tilted. "Human, your physical output is illogical for your mass." "It's called adrenaline," Elias gasped, giving one final, desperate shove. The beam shifted just enough for the Xylosian to pull their leg free. "A primitive survival cocktail," Kalen noted, but there was a new note in their synthesized voice, something other than detached analysis. They tested their leg, which bent at an unnatural angle. "Damage is significant but not critical. My function remains at 72%. A loud roar echoed from deeper within the wreckage. "By the forge of my ancestors, I still draw breath." Grak the Gralnok emerged, pounding a massive, 4-fingered fist against his broad, scaly chest. He had a deep gash on his brow, from which green blood oozed, but otherwise seemed unharmed. His yellow, slitted eyes surveyed the devastation. The pilot, Elias, followed his gaze to the cockpit. It was a compressed ball of metal and fused glass. There would be no answer. They were stranded. A rustling sound came from a pile of emergency supply crates. A small, furry head with twitching antennae popped up. It was Ziv, a Cathar, a species known throughout the quadrant for their scavenging skills and situational ethics. His large, black eyes darted between the survivors and the scattered supplies. "Well," Ziv chittered, his voice a high-pitched whine. "This complicates my delivery contract. The cargo is a total loss." "Total?" He was already stuffing nutrient-paste tubes into the numerous pockets of his jumpsuit. "Status report, Ziv," Kalen commanded, their voice regaining its authoritative tone despite their injury. "Status is we're marooned on a ball of dirt at the wrong end of nowhere, Captain," Ziv squeaked. "Long-range comms are vaporized. The Singularity core is inert. The ship is scrap. One more survivor." Lyra, the Ethelian science officer, phased into view near the ship's broken science array. Her form was a semi-corporeal shimmer of light and energy, anchored by a sophisticated containment suit that gave her a vaguely humanoid shape. Ethelians were beings of pure energy, their minds vast and ancient. "The planetary composition is fascinating." Lyra's voice was a soft, melodic hum, a stark contrast to the grim reality. "Silicon, carbon, heavy metals. The flora exhibits a form of low-level bioluminescence powered by geothermal radiation. There is a complex ecosystem. We are not alone." Kalen's mandibles clicked decisively. "Then our priority is security and shelter. Grak, establish a defensible perimeter. Ziv, complete a full inventory of functional supplies. Lyra, I need a detailed atmospheric and biological analysis. Focus on immediate threats. Human Thorn, assist Grak. Your species has a documented history of primitive warfare. You may be of some use." Nodded, ignoring the backhanded compliment. He looked at the alien crew, a collection of beings from worlds with wildly different evolutionary paths. Kalen, the insectoid logician. Grak, the reptilian warrior. Lyra, the energy-based intellectual. Ziv, the rodent-like opportunist. And him, Elias Thorn, a soft, fleshy biped from a world of water and rock. He was the weakest, the most fragile, the least technologically advanced being here. A specimen. But as he looked out at the alien jungle, at the twin suns casting their strange, dual-toned light, a feeling other than fear began to stir in his chest. It was a deep, primal instinct, a whisper from a million years of ancestors who had clawed their way to the top of their own world's food chain. Here, far from the rules and hierarchies of galactic civilization, those ancient instincts might be the most valuable asset any of them had. Chapter 2. The first 48 hours were a testament to Kalen's unyielding adherence to protocol. A perimeter was established, with Grak's formidable presence serving as a powerful deterrent to the curious, multi-limbed grazers that skirted the edges of the clearing. Ziv, under duress, produced an inventory that was as grim as expected. Food for 3 weeks, water for 1, and medical supplies that were largely incompatible with Elia's human physiology. Lyra's report confirmed the air was safe, but cautioned against a dozen airborne allergens and microbes of unknown effect. The first major challenge was water. The ship's recyclers and purifiers were a mangled wreck. Kalen's approach was logical and slow. "Lyra will construct a rudimentary chemical analyzer from the lab's salvage," the captain announced. "We will test local water sources for contaminants. We will not risk biological compromise." "Could take days, Captain," Elias pointed out, his throat already feeling dry. "We don't have days. We will proceed in an orderly fashion, human," Kalen clicked, dismissing him. "Unnecessary risk is illogical." Watch the Zalosian hobble away to direct Ziv in sorting debris. He looked at Grak, who was sharpening a piece of hull metal into a crude blade, his expression one of stoic patience. He saw Lyra, a shimmering ghost, meticulously reassembling sensor components. They were all following their ingrained programming, the soldier, the scientist, the bureaucrat. But survival wasn't a program. It was a messy, intuitive art. Frustration gnawed at him. He left the crash site, ignoring Kalen's sharp command to stay within the perimeter. Grak grunted but didn't move to stop him. The Gralnok had seen Elias heave the beam off the captain. A sliver of respect had been earned. Elias moved not toward the loudest sounds or the most obvious clearings, but toward the subtle dips in the terrain. He didn't have Lyra's sensors, but he had eyes and ears honed by millions of years of evolution. He listened, not just for threats but for the rhythm of the world. He noticed how a flock of 6-winged, iridescent creatures all flew in the same direction, low to the ground. He saw the tracks of a small, furry animal leading into a dense thicket of the glowing, spiral trees. He followed the tracks, his movements quiet and deliberate. His father, a park ranger, had taught him how to read a forest. This was an alien forest, but the principles were the same. Life needs water. Follow the life. After an hour of careful trekking, he heard it, a faint, musical gurgling. He pushed through a curtain of thick, velvety leaves and found it. A stream, its water running crystal clear over smooth, gray stones. He didn't drink. He knelt, watching. He saw one of the small, furry creatures he'd been tracking creep to the edge, dip its snout in and drink deeply before scurrying away. He watched for 10 minutes. The creature didn't keel over. It wasn't conclusive proof, but it was a powerful data point. He took a sample in a salvaged canteen and made his way back. He also brought something else. On the way, he'd noticed that the furry creatures were digging at the base of a specific broad-leafed fern, pulling up gnarled, pale tubers and devouring them. He dug one up himself. It smelled starchy, like an underripe potato. He walked back into camp to a tense silence. Kalen's multifaceted eyes fixed on him. You defied a direct order, Thorn. Your actions were reckless. My actions found this, Elias said, holding up the canteen. Water and potential food. He held out the tuber. Lyra drifted over, her luminous form pulsing with curiosity. A delicate tendril of light extended from her suit and scanned the canteen. Minimal microbial content. Trace minerals are unfamiliar but not overtly toxic. With basic filtration, it should be potable. She then turned her sensor to the tuber. Starch-heavy carbohydrates, a complex protein structure, potentially nutritious, but it contains a mild neurotoxin. Ziv, who had been listening, wailed. Neurotoxin, he's trying to poison us. I knew the primitive couldn't be trusted. The creature that ate it seemed fine, Elias said calmly, looking at Lyra. Is the toxin persistent? Can it be neutralized? Lyra's form shimmered as she processed. The molecule is complex. Ah, interesting. It appears to be thermally unstable. High temperatures should break it down completely. Nodded. He took a flat piece of metal from the wreckage, gathered some of the dry, fibrous moss that clung to the spiral trees, and using a battery from a shattered toolkit and a length of wire, created a spark. Within minutes, he had a small, crackling fire going. The other survivors watched, transfixed. Fire was a primitive technology, something their own cultures had surpassed millennia ago, relegating it to historical texts and ceremonial use. But here, under the alien sky, it was a beacon of warmth and hope. Grak lumbered over, his reptilian features unreadable, and sat near the flames, the warmth reflecting in his yellow eyes. He looked at Elias, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was a gesture of profound respect in Gralnak culture. Elias sliced the tubers and laid them on the hot metal. A rich, nutty aroma soon filled the air. He offered a piece to Grak first. The warrior sniffed it, then devoured it in a single bite. He grunted in satisfaction. Kalen watched the scene, their mandibles working silently. Their structured, logical plan had been to spend days building a chemical analyzer. Elias, using what the captain considered primitive intuition and reckless behavior, had solved the water and food problem in a few hours. The human had not followed a single protocol. He had simply observed, deduced, and acted. Your methods are unorthodox, Thorn, Kalen said, the words carefully measured. But they work, Elias replied, not with arrogance but with simple fact. He looked at the fire, at the faces of the aliens gathered around it. For the first time since the crash, they weren't just a collection of stranded individuals. They were a group, sharing warmth and food. And at the center of it, holding the knowledge of how to create that warmth and find that food, was the human. The specimen was beginning to look like a survivor. Chapter 3: The uneasy truce forged by fire and roasted tubers lasted less than a week. The jungle, it turned out, was not merely a passive source of sustenance. It was an active participant in their struggle, and it had teeth. The attack came at twilight, when the blue sun had set and the dim red dwarf painted the world in monochrome shades of crimson and black. A chittering howl echoed from the trees, a sound that vibrated in Elias' bones. Grak was on his feet instantly, his makeshift blade in one hand and a heavy metal pipe in the other. Hostiles, the Gralnak bellowed. To arms, they came in a rush, a pack of six-legged, canine-like predators. Their bodies were lean and corded with muscle, covered in a coarse, dark fur that blended with the shadows. Their jaws, filled with needle-sharp teeth, unhinged wider than anything Elias had ever seen. There were at least 8 of them. Kalen, ever the tactician, began issuing orders. Defensive formation, Grak hold the center. Ziv to the wreckage, find a defensible position. Lyra, generate a high-frequency sonic pulse. Thorn, fall in behind Grak. Grak roared a challenge and met the first creature's charge with a brutal swing of his pipe. Bone crunched and the beast went down with a yelp. But two more immediately swarmed him, their claws raking at his thick scales. Lyra's form pulsed, and a piercing, high-frequency sound filled the air. The creatures flinched, shaking their heads, but their ferocity was undiminished. They were driven by a hunger that overwhelmed the discomfort. Elias saw the flaw in Kaelin's strategy immediately. A static defense would eventually be overrun. They were being surrounded. While Grak was a force of nature, he couldn't be everywhere at once. The creatures were smart, flanking them, testing their defenses. "This isn't working," Elias shouted over the din. "We need to change the battlefield. Hold the line, Thorn. That is an order." Kaelin clicked back, trying to strike at a predator with their damaged leg, which buckled under the strain. Elias ignored the order. Survival was the only order that mattered now. He grabbed a burning brand from the fire. The creatures recoiled from the flame, hissing. An idea sparked in his mind, desperate and dangerous. He saw the thick, fibrous moss growing in a wide ring around their camp. He'd noted earlier how dry it was. "Grak, fall back, draw them toward the ship," Elias yelled. Grak, pinned by two beasts, glanced at him, his yellow eyes wide with battle fury. He saw the burning brand in Elias' hand and seemed to understand instantly. With a furious roar, he threw one of the creatures into the other and began a fighting retreat toward the wrecked hull of the drifter. Elias ran in a crouch, touching the brand to the dry moss. It didn't just burn, it erupted. A wall of orange flame roared to life, encircling the outer edge of the camp and trapping the predators between the fire and the ship. Panic seized the pack. They screeched, turning from their prey to face the new, terrifying threat of the fire. "Now," Elias yelled. He'd noticed a deep ditch near the ship's landing gear during their initial setup, a natural pitfall. Drive them into the trench. The dynamic had shifted completely. They were no longer the defenders, they were the hunters. Elias, Grak, and even Kaelin, using a long metal rod as a spear, advanced, using the fire at their backs to force the panicked creatures toward the hidden trap. Ziv, seeing the tide turn, emerged from his hiding spot and began throwing rocks, his high-pitched war cries adding to the chaos. The first predator, blinded by smoke and fear, tumbled into the trench with a surprised yelp. A second and third followed. The remaining beasts, their pack broken and their instincts screaming, finally fled back into the smoldering jungle. Silence descended, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the whimpers of the trapped creatures in the pit. Grak stood panting, his chest heaving. He looked at the fire, then at the trench, then at Elias. He let out a short, guttural laugh. "A good hunt." Kaelin was not pleased. The captain hobbled toward Elias, their multifaceted eyes glowing with cold fury. "You deliberately defied my command structure. You endangered the entire group with a reckless, uncontrolled elemental force. Your command structure was getting us killed." Elias shot back, his adrenaline still singing. "Your static formation was a death sentence. I saw a weakness in them, fire, and an opportunity in the terrain. I used them." "Are not the commander here human?" "There's no commander here," Elias said, gesturing at the alien jungle. "There's just us and that doesn't care about your rank or your protocols. It only cares about who's smart enough and tough enough to survive another night." A tense silence fell over the group. Lyra shimmered, her voice soft but clear. "From a tactical perspective, Captain, Elias Thorn's strategy was unconventional but demonstrably superior. He did not merely react to the threat. He manipulated the environment to neutralize it. This displays a high order of predatory intelligence." Ziv, ever the opportunist, nodded vigorously. "He saved my fur. The captain's plan was orderly. Thorn's plan worked." Kaelin looked from one face to another. They saw Grak's clear respect, Lyra's analytical approval, and Ziv's craven gratitude, all directed at the human. Their authority, built on a foundation of rank and procedure, had cracked. Elias had offered something more compelling. "Results. The chain of command is the only thing that separates us from savagery," Kaelin said, their voice low and tight. "No," Elias replied, his gaze steady. "The only thing that separates us from being victims is the will to dominate our circumstances. Call it savage if you want. I call it living to see the next sunrise." He turned away and began the grim task of dispatching the creatures in the pit. It was brutal work, but necessary. They couldn't risk them attracting something larger. As he worked, he could feel the eyes of the aliens on his back. He was no longer just a fellow survivor. He was a contender. The power dynamic on XG734 had irrevocably shifted. Chapter 4, the victory over the Predators, bought them time, but it couldn't solve their core problem. The crash site was compromised. The scent of blood and burned moss would attract every scavenger and predator for kilometers. They had to move. It was Kalen who proposed a destination, a logical choice based on Lyra's planetary scans. There is a plateau approximately 30 kilometers to the northeast. Elevation is higher, offering a strategic vantage point. Geothermal readings suggest the presence of caves, providing superior shelter. It was a sound plan. But as they prepared to leave, Elias felt a strange, persistent distraction. It was not a sound, but a feeling. A low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate at the edge of his hearing, a pull in the marrow of his bones. It was coming from the south, the opposite direction of the plateau. "We should go south," Elias said, interrupting Kalen's briefing. The captain paused. "On what basis do you make this illogical suggestion, Thorn?" "I don't know," Elias admitted, frustrated by his inability to explain it. "It's a feeling, a pull, something is there." Ziv snorted. "Feelings, we're navigating by primitive human superstition now. The plateau has caves, warm, dry caves." "I agree with Ziv's sentiment, if not his tone," Kalen said. "We will proceed to the location with the highest probability of survival based on quantifiable data. We go northeast." For 2 days, they trekked through the alien jungle. The journey was arduous. Grak took the lead, hacking through the thick, rubbery vegetation. Lyra constantly scanned for biological threats, while Ziv complained incessantly. Kalen, despite their injury, pushed on with relentless determination. But the whole time, the hum in Elias' mind grew stronger, a persistent thrum calling to him from the wrong direction. He grew agitated, his focus slipping. He almost walked into a patch of spore-releasing fungi that Lyra identified as a potent paralytic at the last second. That night, as they made camp, Grak sat beside him. "Your spirit is unsettled, human. You fight the path." "Path feels wrong, Grak," Elias confessed. "Kalen's path is one of logic," the Gralnok rumbled. "My people value strength. Lyra's value knowledge. The Cathar value things." "Your people, Thorn, what do they value?" Elias thought for a moment. "Persistence, I guess. Hope. Sometimes we just follow our gut even when it doesn't make sense." "Perhaps your gut is your strength," Grak said, a surprising piece of philosophy from the warrior. "A warrior who does not trust his instincts is already dead." Next morning, the decision was taken out of their hands. A torrential downpour began, turning the ground to a sucking morass. The rain was acidic, sizzling where it touched the ship's metal they carried, forcing them to take shelter under a massive, stony overhang. They were pinned down. "The plateau is inaccessible in these conditions," Lyra hummed. "The route will be flooded." Trapped and miserable, the strange hum in Elias' head became almost unbearable. It was no longer a vague feeling. It was a clear signal, a psychic beacon in the storm. "Going," he said, standing up. "Do not be a fool, human," Kalen snapped. "You will die in that storm. It's south of here, not far. Whatever is making that feeling, it's our only chance. I know it." He couldn't explain how he knew. He just did. This time, when he turned to leave, Grak rose with him. "The human's instincts have not failed us yet. I will follow him." Lyra's form shimmered. "My scans detect anomalous energy readings in the direction he indicates. High concentration of exotic, stable particles. It is scientifically intriguing." Ziv looked from the furious Kalen to the determined faces of the others. "Well, I'm not staying here alone," he squeaked, gathering his pack. Defeated, Kalen let out a string of angry clicks. "Fine. We follow the human's irrational impulse. But when it leads to our demise, I will note it in my final report." They moved south into the teeth of the storm. The hum was Elias' compass. It led them through treacherous, rocky terrain until they found themselves before a sheer cliff face, a dead end. "Feeling has led us to a rock wall, Thorn," Kalen spat, their voice dripping with vindication. But Elias was staring at the wall. It wasn't natural. The stones were too perfectly fitted, covered in moss and age, but their seams were impossibly precise. and the hum was deafening here. He ran his hand over the cold, wet stone. He felt a seam, a slight depression. Following his instinct, he pushed. With a grinding groan that echoed through the ages, a section of the cliff face slid inwards, revealing a dark, cavernous opening. It was a doorway. They stepped inside out of the acid rain into a vast, silent space. Their lights cut through millennia of darkness, revealing a city. It was a city of impossible scale, carved from the inside of the mountain itself. Soaring arches, graceful bridges spanning chasms of blackness, and silent towers all wrought from a single, non-reflective black stone. By the first spawn, Grak breathed, his warrior's heart awed. This architecture, it violates several known principles of structural engineering, Lyra hummed, her form pulsing brightly with excitement. The material, it absorbs all sensor waves. It should not exist. They moved deeper, their footsteps the first sounds to disturb the silence in eons. They entered a central plaza, and here they found what the builders had left behind: murals. They were carved into the black stone walls with breathtaking artistry, depicting tall, impossibly slender beings with elongated limbs and large, serene eyes. The Wanderers. But it was what the Wanderers were observing in the murals that made Elia's heart stop. One vast mural showed the Wanderers looking at a star chart, a familiar spiral arm of a galaxy highlighted. Another showed them observing a blue planet from orbit. And a third, the largest of all, depicted the evolution of life on that planet. It showed primordial seas, lumbering reptiles, and then figures huddled around a fire, their faces raw and fierce, their hands clutching stone tools. Humans. They were watching us, Elias whispered, his voice trembling. Lyra drifted closer to the wall. It would seem so. This civilization was ancient beyond reckoning. They observed the genesis of your species. The center of the plaza was a raised dais. Upon it rested a single, intricately carved stone chair, a throne. As Elias approached it, the hum in his mind focused, coalescing into a single pure note. The air crackled with energy. Glyphs on the throne and the floor around it began to glow with a soft, white light. The others backed away, but Elias felt compelled to move forward. He was not afraid. He felt welcomed. He felt like he had come home. Chapter 5. As Elias stepped onto the dais, the glowing glyphs brightened, and a profound, resonant chime echoed through the cavernous city. It was the source of the hum, now a clear, welcoming tone that seemed to settle the frantic energy in his own mind. He looked at the throne. It was not menacing, but inviting. Carved from the same impossible black stone, it was sized for a being larger than himself, yet it seemed to call to him specifically. "Thorn, be cautious," Kalen warned, their scientific and military mind unable to process what was happening. This could be a defense system, a trap, but Elias didn't hear the fear in Kalen's voice. He heard the invitation of the throne. He reached out and placed his hand on its cool, smooth surface. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. It was not an electric shock, but a psychic one. A flood of information, of images and emotions poured into his mind. It wasn't a language of words, but of pure concept. He saw the Wanderers. He saw them traveling between the stars not as conquerors, but as gardeners, as observers. They saw life as the universe's most precious art form, and they sought out its most unique expressions. He saw their discovery of primordial Earth. He felt their fascination with humanity. In the raw, chaotic mix of early humans, the capacity for brutal, predatory violence existing alongside deep empathy, altruism, and creative ingenuity, they saw a spark they called the discordant flame. It was a unique evolutionary gamble, a creature that could be both a monster and a saint, a destroyer and a creator. They believed this chaotic duality held the potential for a consciousness unlike any other in the galaxy. They built this outpost on XG734 not just to observe, but as a sanctuary, a place of study. The throne was not a seat of power, but a resonance chair, a device designed to interface with a sentient mind. And it was calibrated for the specific, chaotic frequency of a human consciousness. The flood of information receded, leaving behind not just memories, but a deep, intuitive understanding. It was as if the planet's entire operating system had been downloaded into his brain. He could feel the network of fungal life beneath the soil, sense the subtle shifts in atmospheric pressure, and understand the intricate dance of predator and prey not as an outsider, but as a part of the system itself. He knew with absolute certainty that the acidic rain would stop in precisely 4 hours, and that a flock of migratory herbivores would pass through the valley to the west at sunrise. He turned to his crew, his eyes clear and calm. "It's not a trap, it's a key. They were waiting." "Waiting for what?" Grak asked, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade, his warrior's instincts on high alert. "For one of us," Elias said, gesturing back toward the mural of the early humans. "For a human." He walked off the dais, the light from the glyphs fading as he moved away. "The storm will pass soon. We need to gather the luminescent moss from the eastern passage. A colony of cave crawlers will emerge from hibernation when the temperature drops tonight, and they are repelled by that specific light frequency." Others stared at him. He was speaking with an authority that dwarfed Kalen's military commands. It wasn't arrogance, it was certainty. "Could you possibly know that?" Kalen demanded, their logic-driven mind rebelling against the impossibility of it. "The chair told me," Elias said simply. "This place, it speaks to me. I can understand this world now." Over the next few days, Elias' transformation from contender to leader was absolute. He guided them through the subterranean city with an unerring sense of direction. He led them to a chamber where the wanderers had cultivated edible fungi, solving their food problem indefinitely. He found a pure, filtered spring deep within the rock, providing an endless supply of fresh water. He explained the symbiotic relationship between two seemingly hostile life forms, allowing Lyra to synthesize a powerful healing agent from them that she used to fully repair Kalen's damaged leg. Each prediction, each piece of impossible knowledge, solidified his position. Grak followed him with the unwavering loyalty of a warrior who has found a worthy chieftain. Lyra, her scientific curiosity fully ignited, saw Elias as a living bridge between known science and a new, organic form of data processing. Ziv, seeing the abundance of food and safety, became his most vocal supporter, his survival instinct telling him to stick close to the human. The final concession came from Kalen. They had been trying to repair the ship's short-range beacon, a logical task that offered a slim hope of signaling a passing vessel. After 3 days of fruitless work, Elias approached the captain. "A seismic event is coming," he said quietly. "A big one. The geothermal vents in this region are about to enter a period of high activity. This entire section of the mountain will be unsafe within 24 hours. We need to move to the upper levels of the city." Stopped their work, their mandibles clicking in agitation. "My analysis of the local geology shows no indication of such an event." "Sensors can't read the pressure building in the magma chambers 10 kilometers below us," Elias replied. "But I can feel it. It's like a headache for the entire planet." Kalen looked at the faces of the crew. They were all watching Elias, waiting for his direction. The Zalosians' rigid posture seemed to sag. All their life they had relied on data, on protocol, on the unassailable fortress of logic. But on this world, logic was a foreign language. The human, with his mysterious connection and his discordant flame, was the native speaker. "What do you command, Thorn?" Kalen asked, the words tasting like defeat and liberation all at once. It was not a question. It was a transfer of power. Elias met the captain's multifaceted eyes. He saw not a rival but a brilliant officer trapped by their own strengths. "I command nothing, Kalen. But I suggest we work together to get everyone to safety. I have the destination. You have the skills to organize the move efficiently and securely. I need you." That moment, he demonstrated the other half of the human equation the Wanderers had so admired. Not just the predatory dominance to seize control, but the empathy to build a team. Kalen gave a slight bow, a gesture of respect from a Zalosian officer that was rarely, if ever, given to another species. "We will proceed as you suggest, leader," Kalen said. The title hung in the air, undisputed. Elias Thorn, the human specimen, was now the hope and leader of the castaways. He had dominated his circumstances, not through brute force, but through a persistence and adaptability that had, against all odds, connected him to the very soul of the alien world. Chapter 6. Under Elias' leadership, the survivors thrived in the ancient city. They moved to the upper levels, a section of the subterranean metropolis that was more akin to a palace. With vast, open chambers and terraces that overlooked the sprawling jungle below. The seismic event Elias had predicted arrived on schedule, a series of deep, rolling tremors that sent rockfalls crashing through the lower passages they had just vacated. His foresight had saved their lives, cementing his authority beyond any possible doubt. Life settled into a new kind of normality. Grak trained them in basic combat and defense, his respect for Elias manifesting as fierce protectiveness. Lyra, with Elias' guidance, became the master of their new environment, cataloging the city's wonders and turning its alien biology to their advantage. Kalen, freed from the burden of ultimate command, excelled as a logistician and strategist, organizing their new society with crisp efficiency. Ziv, well-fed and safe, became a surprisingly effective quartermaster, his hoarding instincts redirected for the good of the group. Elias, however, felt a growing unease. His connection to the planet, a gift from the resonance chair, was a double-edged sword. While it gave him incredible insight, it also made him privy to the planet's deeper rhythms, its ancient pains. He could feel a sickness deep within the world, a growing pressure that the recent tremors had only hinted at. He spent more and more time in the throne room, trying to coax more information from the Wanderers' device. He learned that their departure from the planet had been hasty. They hadn't just left, they had fled. The planet, for all its beauty, was a geological time bomb. Its core was unstable, prone to massive, cyclical energy releases that could render the surface uninhabitable for centuries. The Wanderers had built their city as a temporary research station, never a permanent home. The crisis came not as a tremor, but as a change in the light. The faint, internal glow of the spiral-trunk trees in the jungle below began to pulse, shifting from a soft white to an angry, erratic red. "Elias, what is this?" Lyra hummed, her shimmering form flickering with anxiety as she stood beside him on a high terrace. "The flora's energy output is spiking exponentially. It's a chain reaction, spreading across the continent." Elias closed his eyes, concentrating, pushing his consciousness out into the planet's network. The headache he had felt before was now a raging migraine. The pressure in the planet's core was building toward a critical point. It wasn't just an earthquake coming, it was an eruption of planetary scale. The geothermal instability was reaching its apex. The Wanderers called it the Great Cleansing, he said, his voice grim. It's a massive release of radioactive geothermal energy from the planetary mantle. It will vent through the crust, superheating the atmosphere and sterilizing everything. The whole continent, Ziv squeaked, dropping a crate of edible fungi. "As in, everything dies?" "Everything," Elias confirmed. The Wanderers' models gave them a decade of warning. The crash of the drifter, its singularity core hitting the tectonic plate, it must have accelerated the timetable. "We don't have decades." "Lyra, how long?" Lyra's form pulsed frantically as she cross-referenced the energy spike with the geological data she had. "The feedback loop is catastrophic. Based on the current acceleration, 72 hours. Maybe less." Despair, cold and absolute, washed over the group. 72 hours to escape a planetary apocalypse. They were trapped in a stone tomb on a dying world. Grak slammed his fist against a stone pillar. "Then we will die. But we will face the end on our feet as warriors." Kalen sank onto a stone bench, their usual rigidity gone, replaced by the hollow stillness of pure, logical defeat. "There is no escape, no ship, no shelter can withstand this. All variables lead to a zero-sum outcome. We are already dead." Ziv began to sob, a pathetic, chittering sound of utter terror. The hope that Elias had so carefully built crumbled into ash. He felt the weight of their lives on his shoulders, a crushing burden. For a moment he let their despair infect him. Kalen was right, it was hopeless. But then he felt it again. The quiet, insistent call of the resonance chair. It wasn't just a databank, it was a tool. And beneath the Wanderers' data on the coming apocalypse, there was one final, desperate entry. A fail-safe. A last resort they had built but never had the chance to use. He turned and ran back toward the throne room, the others watching him with dazed, hopeless eyes. He sprinted through the silent, blackstone corridors, his heart pounding a rhythm of frantic, defiant hope against his ribs. He burst into the chamber, the glyphs on the floor lighting up to greet him. He placed his hands on the throne, not just seeking information, but demanding it. He poured his own will, his own desperate refusal to surrender, into the device. An image bloomed in his mind, a vast, spherical chamber deep in the planet's crust, at the very heart of the city's foundation. In the center of the chamber was a complex crystalline structure, a device the Wanderers called the harmonic regulator. It was designed to generate a counter-frequency to the planet's chaotic core energy, to soothe the geological turmoil and stabilize the entire tectonic plate. But it required an immense amount of power and a sophisticated organic processor to guide the energy flow. The Wanderers had lacked the right kind of mind to operate it. Their logical, orderly consciousness couldn't interface with the planet's raw chaos. To control chaos, you needed a mind that understood it, a mind with a discordant flame. The fail-safe was designed for a human. He raced back to the terrace, his face alive with a fierce, almost terrifying intensity. "There's a chance," he yelled, his voice cutting through their despair like a lightning strike. "The Wanderers built a way to stop it, a regulator deep below us, but we have to get to it. And we have to get to it now." He looked at them, not as their leader, but as a man possessed by a singular, impossible purpose. Kalen was right. By all logic, we're already dead. But I've never put much faith in logic. He offered a grim smile. "Who wants to help me fight a planet?" Chapter 7, The Descent, was a journey into hell. The entire mountain groaned around them, a beast in its death throes. The tremors were no longer intermittent. They were a constant, violent shudder that threatened to shake the ancient city apart. Dust and stone fragments rained from the ceilings of the impossibly vast corridors. Elias led the way, a man driven. The map to the harmonic regulator chamber was burned into his mind, a glowing path through the darkness. But the path was no longer clear. Entire sections of the lower city had collapsed, forcing them into treacherous, uncharted territory. "The main access tunnel is gone," Kalen shouted over the roar of grinding rock, pointing their light at a chasm filled with rubble where a grand causeway had once been. "There is no other way, according to the city's schematics." "The schematics are wrong," Elias countered, his eyes closed for a second as he consulted the living map in his head. "The Wanderers built service conduits, hidden passages. There's one through here." He pointed to what looked like a solid wall. Grak, trusting Elias implicitly, slammed his powerful shoulder against the indicated spot. The stone cracked, revealing a darker seam. Working together, he and Kalen pried the slab loose, revealing a narrow, claustrophobic tunnel. "Ziv," Elias commanded. "You're the only one small enough to fit. You have to go through and see if it's clear on the other side." The Cathar, who had been trembling with fear, looked at the dark, tight hole and then at Elias' unyielding face. His instinct for self-preservation screamed at him to refuse, but his other, newer instinct, loyalty to the leader who had kept him alive, won out. With a whimper, he squeezed into the passage and disappeared. Minutes later, his voice, tinny and distant, echoed back. "It's clear, but it opens onto a ledge over a very big drop." One by one, they squeezed through, emerging onto a narrow precipice inside a colossal natural cavern. Below them, a river of molten rock flowed, casting a hellish red glow on the scene. The heat was immense. The regulator chamber was on the other side of the lava river, nearly 100 meters away. The bridge that had once spanned it was gone, its shattered remnants visible on the far side. "We are finished," Kalen stated, the finality in their voice absolute. No, it was Lyra. Her luminous form was pulsing erratically in the violent energy field of the cavern. "The support cables for the bridge, they are made of a crystalline alloy. They are still anchored on this side." She pointed a tendril of light toward a massive mooring high above them. "If we can reach them, we might be able to swing across." It was Grak who volunteered. The climb was near impossible, up a sheer rock face superheated by the lava below. But the Gralnak was relentless. With sheer brute strength and a warrior's contempt for pain, he scaled the wall, his claws finding purchase in tiny cracks, and secured a rope for the others. The crossing was terrifying. Each of them swung through the scorching air, suspended over a river of fire, trusting in a rope held by their warrior companion. They made it, collapsing on the far side, singed and exhausted. They were at the entrance to the regulator chamber, a massive circular door sealed with glowing glyphs. "It requires a biosignature and a resonant frequency to open," Lyra hummed, her form flickering. "Elias, it has to be you," stepped forward, placing his hand on the door. He didn't just touch it, he pushed his consciousness into it, the same way he had with the throne. He projected his will, his human essence. The fear, the hope, the desperation, the fierce love he felt for the strange alien family he had forged in this crucible. The glyphs flared, and with a deep, resonant boom, the immense door slid open. The chamber was a perfect sphere. In its exact center, suspended by fields of shimmering energy, was the harmonic regulator, a crystal the size of a small shuttle, facets of it pulsing with a sickly, chaotic light. This was the heart of the planet's sickness. The interface is in the center of the crystal, Elias said, his voice distant. He was reading the final instructions from the Wanderers. I have to get inside it. He walked the energy bridge to the crystal. An opening dilated to receive him. He stepped inside into the core of the machine. He was floating in a space of pure light and sound, the chaos of the planet's core a deafening roar all around him. A throne, identical to the one in the upper city, waited for him. He sat. The moment he made contact, the full, unrestrained fury of the planet slammed into him. It was a psychic tsunami of pain, pressure, and rage. The planet wasn't evil, it was in agony. The unstable core was a wound that had festered for eons. The regulator wasn't a cage for it, but a focusing lens. It needed a mind to direct the energy, to soothe it, to sing it a new song. Outside, the chamber shook violently. The crystal began to glow a furious, angry red. His life signs are critical, Lyra cried out. The energy flowing through him is astronomical. It will tear his consciousness apart. Inside the storm, Elias felt his identity dissolving, his thoughts scattering. He was losing. The chaos was too strong. He was just one small, fragile human. He was going to die. And then he remembered Grak's fierce loyalty, Lyra's insatiable curiosity, Ziv's terrified but stubborn will to live, Kalen's reluctant, hard-won respect. He wasn't just Elias Thorne the human, he was their leader, their hope. His dominance wasn't for himself, it was for them. He stopped fighting the chaos. He stopped trying to cage it. Instead, he embraced it. He let the discordant flame the Wanderers had so admired burn freely. He met the planet's rage with his own fierce will to live. He met its pain with his empathy. He didn't suppress the storm. He became its center. He began to harmonize with it, to weave the threads of his own consciousness, his memories of pine scent and rainfall, his love for his crew, his unyielding persistence, into the planet's raw power. He wasn't dominating the planet. He was connecting with it, accepting its pain and offering it a new pattern, a new stability. Outside, the red glow of the crystal softened, shifting to a brilliant, steady blue, then to a pure, stable white. The violent shaking of the chamber ceased. The roar of the lava river below faded to a gentle hum. A profound, planet-wide silence fell. The crystal opened, and Elias floated out, collapsing onto the energy bridge, exhausted but alive. Grak was the first to reach him, lifting him with a gentleness that belied his great strength. Kalen, Lyra, and Ziv gathered around, their expressions a mixture of awe, relief, and reverence. They looked at the human in their midst, the fragile, soft-skinned primitive from a backwater world. He had not just saved them. He had tamed a world. He had faced down a planetary apocalypse and imposed his will upon it, not with weapons or technology, but with the very essence of his chaotic, persistent, indomitable humanity. They carried him from the chamber, back up through the now silent and stable city. When they reached the high terrace, they looked out upon their world. The twin suns were rising, bathing the jungle in a light that seemed cleaner, newer. The trees no longer pulsed with angry energy, but with a calm, gentle luminescence. The air itself felt peaceful. Elias stood, supported by Grak and Kalen, and looked out at the world he had saved. It was his world now. They were its sole inhabitants. Rescue was a distant dream, perhaps an impossible one. But as he looked at the faces of his crew, he knew they were not castaways any longer. They were pioneers. And he, Elias Thorne, was their leader. They would not just survive here. They would build. They were the first citizens of a new world, born from fire and chaos, and led by the echo of the Wanderer.